You have to imagine an alley with absolutely wonderful street artists. Going down the alley, left and right are wonderful musicians trying to get you so that you can give them their money. It is perfect if you go to the street and there's one or two, but when there are 50 musicians doing their thing, I think you have a difficult time to decide, and that's what happens, actually.
Today is actually kind of a cool day because I'm interviewing somebody who's about 2 hours away from me. I think I've mentioned it before, but I'm in Germany these days. So I'm very happy to welcome Oliver Wette to the call. The show notes and anything that we talk about, there'll be links to that. And that will be at pencilkings.com/Oliver Wette, OLIVER-WETTER.
Oliver, what is the name of the city or the town that you're actually in?
I'm in Konz, which is near Trier, and that is, yes, as you said, 2 hours away from you.
Your work is amazing. I guess for people, because this is audio only, I would say that your work is concept art, but it's very figure-driven. How would you describe your work?
Okay, that's difficult. I hope to be versatile. It's just a difficult thing because I have an obvious crush for female models and illustrations, but I always try to experiment, and that's my background. I really like to push boundaries and want to go further with my work. Even if the subject is always the same, there's a lot of room to experiment, and I hope this comes through somehow.
So when you're doing professional work for people, is it mostly figure work, or is it just kind of all over the place?
99% is figure related, and I'm really happy about it. So
yeah, I wasn't sure if your portfolio on your website was different than what you're doing for clients, but it sounds like it's all kind of coming together.
Yep.
When did you decide to, air quotes here, get serious about your artwork, and what was your mindset there?
I worked always on my art since I remember, and there were some times I did not much school, but since I was 20 years old, I thought I will do something more in the art direction. But I always had to have a job to provide an income and do arts as a hobby. So, and that worked until I got my first job offer for a German company. It was an agency called Guterpunkt, and they had a job for me doing a cover for an international author, Will Elliott, and they asked me to do a cover for this, and this was one of the big publishers in Germany, Piper, and then it all started in 2008. That's it, not so special.
This is something that I've learned a little bit in my short time in Europe, this agency thing that I don't feel like it's as common in North America. So how does this work for artists? Like, how did you even get started or know to contact the agency? Were you in touch with them, or did they find you?
Yeah, the latter is the case. So, and that's what I heard from many artists as well. So it's not like you approach them. You can do this, absolutely, and they always ask, so if you have new work, send it over to us. But the first contact, in the best case, comes from the agency. So they saw your work. In this case, they stumbled upon my CG portfolio and found that the style I've provided was matching. So, and I think this is what the agency do, is always, they do a pitch with their idea they have for the publisher, and then they get to the artist and ask, so if I can do it. So, and if the portfolio is strong enough, let's say they have less worries that you can do the job right.
And do you think that the way that they found you, that because you're in Germany and it was a German agency, the fact that I'm guessing that on your profile it said you're listed as in Germany, so this really helps them to filter and find the people that are local? Because I think there's a lot of power in the proximity, or like how far away you are from whoever's trying to hire you. The closer you are, the better your chances of getting the job. Yeah,
that's right, probably. In this case, it was true. So they asked to have some artists or from Germany. So because I think they have to deal with the same issues like we with the time zones. But as I've seen the development of the agencies themselves, so they started up and went from from zero to being a big agency right now. I think it's not that necessary anymore.
Is this how you continue to get the majority of your work, or have you built a name for yourself now that most of it comes from other sources?
Not only the agency, but the publishers themselves give me a call, but it's also from other parts of the industry, different industries. They're also right now I'm doing also a lot of advertising illustration, and that's an absolutely new field for me, but also a lot of fun because less work, better pay. So slowly developing in the right direction, and it comes from different sides, and it depends if I like to do it or not. And so far, it just fits. It matches. I'm happy.
Less work for better pay. I've heard other artists say this before. I was at a Comic-Con. I won't say the artist's name, but he was basically explaining how he formerly was a comic book illustrator, and then he switched to doing video game concept work, and he was just blown away by how much easier it was. And it could just be that, these industries work at different speeds, and because he was moving so fast, then it seemed dramatically different. But for your statement of less work for better pay, what does that really mean to you?
I totally understand the comic comparison. So with my work, it's a little bit different because it's more geared toward illustration, and with that final illustration, which means lots of layers, lots of final touch-ups, and even a book is an advertising, if you want. So regardless of agency, publisher, or a company, they have a vision and want their image the best polished way that they can possibly get for the money. If you have a book, your space is limited. So in this regard, you will think, okay, what much of work can there be? A lot of book publishers suffer from death by committee. An agency, you have an editor, and then you have the committee. Your work can be as good as you want, but if they don't like it and say it will not sell, you can start from scratch. And it happens more often than not. The number of desks your work has to go through is the most daunting part of the progress. I have no problem with working with 3 or at the moment 5 images for an advertising at the same time, because if you work with the right people, that's no problem. And there are less desks the work has to go through. In this regard, it's easier. Even if it takes longer times, it's easier to go through the whole process.
Yeah, this is something that I think a lot of new artists don't realize is that how many iterations things go through before you see the final product. It's very easy to look at your work and then compare it to the cover of a book, but you don't realize that drawing that you're looking at may have gone through literally 50 revisions. Maybe even more.
Yeah.
It may have been started from scratch, 10 times.
Yeah.
For me, it was really eye-opening when we would work in video games, and then it often felt like the legal team was the final art director on these projects. So we would build this stuff and have it pretty much finished and would look awesome, and then it would go to the legal team for review, and the legal team would come back with these crazy changes, and they're doing their job and they're trying to protect the company from potential liability, and I appreciate that. But from the art standpoint, you're just like, this doesn't look like a forklift anymore. This car just looks, it's just wrong now. But I guess that's what you have to do to make it, an original work and satisfy the legal department. As good as you want to do something, there's higher powers that you have to answer to, and often they may not be artists.
Absolutely. I agree.
I was looking on your website and you've gotten started on Patreon. And so if you're listening and you're unfamiliar with what Patreon is, it's a website where you can go and it makes it really easy for your fans to support your work. So it's different than, say, a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo where you're launching a big product and there's kind of like one big payday. With Patreon, it lets you set up more recurring payments, and it seems like it's not so much a launch, it's more like, hey, this is what I'm doing. If you like it and you want to support it, here's your opportunity to do so with your wallet. So you've been on Patreon for, I think you said 6 months, is that correct?
Correct.
Can you just tell us about it? Because I have not been on there. I've just been on there to browse. I see a lot of interesting things happening there. But from your experience as a creative, as a creator, what has it been like?
Okay, I have to start a little bit from scratch. So I found Patreon around 2 or 3 years ago and signed up. So I've just seen the site, recognized it as maybe useful for later, and I have never looked at it. And last year, a student of me signed up there and mentioned, "Oh, it's a nice way to get some commissions." And so I stumbled about it again and thought, maybe I should utilize this page as well. So that's how I got started on it. And sure, if you have a new page or a site or a startup or whatever, you say, okay, let's see what others are doing. And you look around, and with the new attention, you find a lot of artists who do very good there. So there's the artists from DeviantArt, Kimi Chan and Ilya Kupchinov. So you may know them. And if you look at their Patreon pages, you are baffled at how much they make a month, even a week. So, and this can be pretty motivating. But after my little experiment there, it's really sobering, because there is a number of things I've seen that you have to do in order to be successful over there. Other than that, if you don't follow these important guidelines, it is just a tip jar, and that's pretty okay. You have to imagine an alley with absolutely wonderful street artists going down the alley. Left and right are wonderful musicians trying to get you so that you can give them their money. It is perfect if you go to the street and there's one or two, but when there are 50 musicians doing their thing, I think you have a difficult time to decide. And that's what happens actually to me and to a lot of other artists as well. So people come and leave very soon because they have found someone else they like even more, and then they go further. And that's the problem Patreon has to face. And
so just before you continue, just to put this into perspective for people, let's say either per month or per week, whatever, what is the largest amount of money that you've seen an artist making on the site? Because I've seen some crazy examples like that will blow your mind. But what are, because you're more familiar, what's the largest number? And let's just see how high has somebody got?
The biggest one is from the Kimi Chan, which has $30,995 per 2 weeks from a visual artist. Different artists, musicians like Amanda Palmer, who's also utilizing Patreon. If you are a musician and you are popular, I think you can do everything, and it will work for you. So
that was, you said 39,000 every 2 weeks.
No, 30,900.
30,900. 61,800 a month.
Yep. That's
pretty crazy. I don't know any artists that I've met in the commercial space that make anything close to that. This is money that's rolling in every single 2 weeks or whatever. That's pretty awesome.
Okay, there are some fees involved, and so, but it's still a pretty amazing number.
Yeah, what does Patreon end up taking?
I'm not sure, but it's just around a % or two for their fee, and then there are PayPal fees, or maybe even converting fees if you have it. But they have it with a different payment option, so you pay $20 per transaction, and that's it. This is with I think Eurocard, Visa card has an online payment, and once you get over a certain amount, this $20 options becomes pretty cheap.
Okay, so they don't end up actually taking that much. It sounds like maybe 5 or at the very most 10% of what you're making. So it is a very viable way for creatives to create an income stream for themselves. Yeah. There's a lot of people that I've met. They're amazing. However, they get doing their commission work, or they have their day job, and then they're a little bit flat in their off hours. They say, it's great that I have the opportunity to use my creative ability to provide for myself and my family. However, I would really love, 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, whatever it is, to work on this project that I've had on the sideline. There's always a sideline project. Mm-hmm. And I think Patreon is an awesome way where people can potentially create, a little bit of side income that they can then take that time off they need to work on the creative project. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the same for me. because even if I don't make that much a month, it's just a motivation factor that gives me the power to go through it, to say, okay, why should I do this? Why should I do that? And okay, that's it. So you have people waiting for it, and even if they pay just $1 a month, you have an audience, and that's great.
There's that whole thing about 1,000 true fans, that if you could get 1,000 people giving you, I think the concept was $100 a year, then you're pretty set and you can do your thing. You don't have to answer to anybody, and you can basically be in control of your destiny. So now that we've talked about how big it can get, let's go back to you were explaining that there's a problem, that it's hard to be discovered, and this is something that Patreon is working on, because this podcast, I'm sure somebody's going to hear this and be like, hey, I got to check this out. And now there's, 1 or 2 or 3 more people on Patreon. And this is happening every day. I'm sure there's, hundreds of people that are discovering the site for the first time every single day. And then a fraction of those will end up becoming content creators, and it just dilutes everything. What was your experience? How do you get traction on this? Or what do you see people doing that really helps them out?
There are some things you have to know about Patreon, how it works. You either have to experience it yourself, or you can learn from others. So, and that's probably what you are doing here. So maybe it's helpful. And I think so much is true with what happens on other sites as well, like DeviantArt, Facebook. Look at the popular artists on Facebook, how many likes their pages get, and what they do. Actually, you can do. If you're doing good on Facebook, you can do also good on Patreon. But it takes time. So there are a lot of people on Patreon, actually. But as I mentioned before, it's like a very distracting alley of stuff, and you don't know where you have to go first. Think Artist Alley on San Diego Comic-Con. You will have a really hard time to get to every artist and buy something from them. If you have 2 things to offer, you can have a good time. One thing is video tutorials, and the other thing is not safe for work content. Actually, there's nothing in between. If you have these 2, and actually I do not have, but if you have these 2, you have a really good time.
All right, I got to laugh with the not safe for work content. So this is what's driving a lot of things, or from what you've seen, that video tutorials are great. And actually, the person, and I can't remember her name. I believe she's a young Canadian artist, and she's, from my perspective, she's crushing it. And she's got video tutorials with not safe for work content.
Perfect.
So maybe she's maybe we've just outed the secret to Patreon. And I'm guessing it's like tasteful, not safe for work, because nobody wants gross things.
Yeah,
but I could be wrong. I guess you'd have to do your research and crawl down that dark hole.
Absolutely.
And hopefully it's not too dark.
You will find it. You will find it, I'm sure. Yeah, but you can do. You can also walk the line, and if you have a name for yourself, it's even easier. But the one thing you will experience is that you have a duty, and that is you have a promise, and you have to keep it. That people see your name, see your work and your description, and say, okay, that's authentic. That is the artist. With Patreon, there's a lot of room to make errors, because you have a header image, you have a header text, you have a description field, you have a profile field, and all this has to match in a way that it does on another page as well. So that is the first way you can ruin your first step in Patreon. If you look at it and say, okay, my name is this, I do this, and that's why I'm doing my Patreon campaign, that's the easiest thing.
Okay, that seems easy enough, that you can just look at some examples of what people are doing, what the quote unquote successful people are doing, find the similarities between them, and then figure out how you're going to put your own little spin on it and move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have something more. Something none of your dry as dust professors and routine-ridden doctors have. Love, devotion, passion.
So where do you think this goes from here? Like, what's the next step? Is Patreon going to become your full-time thing? Is it just a little side project? And I guess when I said Patreon, I just mean, like, what's next for you in terms of the things that you're working on? Where do you see yourself going? Because I think it's cool. And one of the unique things about this interview, you are creating this side stream of income.
Okay, it's just a bit down because I have lowered my output for Patreon this month. What worked for me was also commissions, and so I have to cut down this point because I'm swamped with work right now, and I have to do all the agency work right now, and my schedule is full until the end of August, mid-September. So actually, until this time, my output on Patreon will be really low, but I will still keep it as a motivation factor. It's perfect to have ideas and to say, okay, this is my deadline. End of the month, I have to have this idea finished. Otherwise, I would not do it. I have many works that I start, leave them lying around for about 10 months and then grab them again and work something out. This still happens, but there's absolutely more in the pipeline, and it shows only this number at the end of the month. So, and in this way, many works that will happen for Patreon will soon become works that I use on T-shirts for conventions or prints, limited edition prints that are available in Germany and on some conventions. End of the year, there will be a German Comic-Con for the first time in Germany. So I'm really looking forward to this event. And so that's where I also make a little income, and slowly everything comes together in a way. It's not so perfectly clear, this picture, but it slowly comes together.
Yeah, definitely. I guess just for any people listening in Europe, what are some of the big art shows that people go to in Europe? Because we hear about San Diego Comic-Con all the time, and there's all these things happening in the US, but I feel like there's a lot more cultural things happening in Germany than, say, in Canada. For example, last Sunday, we just went for a stroll, walked through this park. They had all new art installations in the park, which was really cool. All these sculptures, cool art installations, and you can walk a little bit further, and then they had a symphony playing a free concert outside. And I was just blown away that for me, going to watch a symphony live is something I've always wanted to do, and I got a chance to do it, and it didn't cost me anything. It was free. What are some of the events that people can go to, or that you're looking forward to?
It's hard for me to match my time for it because there are too many, actually. There are some convention calendars. I have to give you the link so you can post it later. Some highlights from me: the Spiel and Comic Action 2015, an amazing big event in Essen around 8th until 11th October. It's very close to the Comic-Con in terms of size, but it's full of games, tabletop, and so games you can play with your children and everything. People come there and play for days just in a row. And they have one hall which is just for comic, and publishers, an artist alley, and also a booth, so you can have some artists with canvas art, everything. So which is pretty impressive, with numbers of 140,000 visitors a year. And more often you have smaller conventions like Nordcon. Then you have a fantasy and roleplay convent. In Cologne, there's a roleplay convention, which is pretty grown in the last years.
Is that like the live action role playing, where people dress up in costumes and then they play like?
Some of these you find on the Spiel 2015 as well, but also on these fantasy roleplay conventions. The roleplay convention, I've seen pictures of, but I've not been there personally yet. But I believe there are also role players and live role players. Then there is what is more popular in Germany is probably book conventions, book fairs. So you have a Frankfurt Book Fair, probably about, and you have a Leipzig Book Fair. These are very popular, and there are always smaller areas where you have people like dressing up for cosplay, and you have artists showing a little bit, but not too much. It is more like artists coming to sign at a publisher's booth. So the booths are very expensive for artists to book. That's where the fair in Essen comes in. They are not cheap, but they are worth their money.
Which ones are you going to be at? You'll be at the one in Essen?
I will be there, yes, with 3 artists as well. And we share 2 booths side by side, which will be around 10 meters in length and showing our work. We're looking forward to it because one of the most expensive but also biggest events for us.
I'm looking forward to that because I'm planning on leaving Germany just at the middle of October. But this lines up very nicely if it starts on the 8th. I look forward to shaking your hand when we go there. And I don't know if it's for sure yet, but I always love to meet people that I meet virtually. If you're an artist or a creative, or you have friends in the online world, see if you can find a way to meet those people somehow, in real life, because you'll just find that you have so much in common because of this passion that you share for whatever the reason is that you met in the first place, that the friendships form very fast, and it's easy to be a loner and, work only on the internet and in forums and whatnot. But there's a completely different experience when you meet people face to face. And this is where really amazing things can happen. You don't know what's going to happen, but definitely something magical happens when you meet face to face. Oliver, that's it for me. Do you have any parting words for anybody?
Except for keep it up, regardless of what you do, make it your own. That's it.
Awesome. And where can people find you online?
My website is fantisio.info with the name Fantisio, everything else which is connected, like CG Portfolio, DeviantArt, and Facebook is a little bit different with Ars Fantisio, but that's it.
So just to spell that out for you, if you're looking for it, it's fantasio.info, and then on the various different channels, the same spelling. And we will have show notes, like I said at the beginning, at pencilkings.com/Oliver Wetter, and that's OLIVER-WETTER. So thank you so much, Oliver. This is great, and I hope that if you're listening, maybe take this as a nudge to check out Patreon. See if there's something that you can do that's new and unique, or if you've got existing fans, maybe it's an easy way for them to support you so that you can work on that graphic novel or that animation or that side project that you've got sitting on the shelf.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Demands patience, skill, years of practice.
Ah, you talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.
If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could hit the 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio and leave us a little comment about what you thought about this.